All right, fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. My name is Ryan Watson. I'm the National Orchard Operations and Education Manager for the Giving Grove. We host monthly education workshops to help folks get accustomed to taking care of their fruit trees. And today's workshop is going to be on Korean natural farming, really one of my favorite topics to teach about. This is stuff that really helped to open my mind for some new practices of holistic management for fruit trees and vegetable, all plants alike as well. So all the things that we're going to talk about today will be applicable to all the different plants that you are working with. Um, Let's see. As I said, monthly workshops. We've got our next workshop is going to be on school orchards, which will be really exciting. That'll be in November. And if you have not had a chance to join one of our workshops before, all of our workshops are recorded and notes are sent out afterwards. So definitely make sure to go check out our website, givinggrove.org/resources, and it'll show at the bottom there all those recordings from our previous workshops. Um, with that, let's get started. Right. All right, so I'd like to just start with an Indigenous acknowledgement here. Um, all of these practices that we're learning are coming from stewardship practices that we have learned from Indigenous communities around the world. This is no different in the stuff that we're going to be talking about today. So just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge the land that we're on and the stewardship and reciprocity of the land that we are learning from and the people that we are taking these lessons from. So today, what we're going to cover, we're going to do a little bit over the soil food web and looking at forests as a model for natural systems. We're going to talk a little bit about the advantages of Korean natural farming methods, talk about some of the Korean natural farming preparations, fermented plant juices, water extractions of plants, lactic acid bacteria creation, as well as apple cider vinegar extracts. That one's a little outside of the Korean natural farming methodology, but a very similar idea of extracting minerals from apple cider vinegar. We're going to get into the application rates and methods and talk about some of those additional resources that you can turn to. But I'd love to start with this framing question, and feel free to put in the chat some of your thoughts to this question. Do forests need outside fertilization to remain healthy? So thinking about how it is that a forest stays healthy. And the answer to that is through the soil food web. So essentially what we're looking at here is the ways in which organic matter, which falls from those plants and trees in the form of leaves and dead branches, is broken down and made accessible for nutrients for those plants and trees, for those various different species to be able to feed on themselves. Essentially, what we're seeing is this cycling of nutrients through the soil food web. And as you see on the right here, this is a picture from Michael Phillips's Mycorrhizae Planet. It's a book that I draw a lot of inspiration from that has a lot of really great information and talking about the ways in which this organic matter is broken down by the various elements of the soil food web to create these nutrients. And that is what we're trying to do, is we'd like to try and mimic that in our system. So as you see here, the forest as a model, and this comes from a visit to our local affiliate in Seattle. This was a visit to the forest in the Pacific Northwest here, and you see some of these mechanisms of what are happening here. Does anybody recognize something that you might see that's happening in these photos here? We have various different plants. This one in the center is one that we will talk about a lot in this workshop. It is a really great source of nutrients, vitamins, and minerals for plant species that helps to feed into that process. We see the breakdown of fallen trees into this lignin-rich source of proteins that feed the mycorrhizae underneath the forest system. That's what's really making our trees healthy, and that is kind of the model that we're working in today. So why are we talking about Korean natural farming? So one of the things that I love about Korean natural farming is that it's really, really basic, simple procedures to be able to make your own shelf-stable amendments at home. Uh, Really what we're doing is working at the underlying health of the trees to be able to increase their resistance to diseases and pests, to be able to increase your yields, which is going to create less maintenance for the trees in the long term. If we can build into this self-sustainable food soil web, we can really start to effectuate the deep health of our trees. That's going to, we'll have um, fuel for these living soils, and we'll be able to create these homemade amendments that are using local resources. So using weeds from your garden, using plants that are accessible all across the place, we're going to be able to use those and take them into benefit. These also have impacts on climate change as well. We're helping to help increase carbon sequestration to help resiliency within the trees. So, as we see from that model of the forest, trees are really designed to live in conjunction with other plant species and with other microbes to be able to live healthily, to be able to create that soil food web so that there are accessible nutrients. And a really important thing to note here is when we're talking about organic soil management and we're talking about organic fruit production, you really have to pay attention to your nutrients and also especially your mineral levels, because no matter what kind of processes we're engaging in here, if we don't have the right soil mineral levels, we're going to see some challenges along the way. We're going to see some struggles in our trees, and we're going to see in a second kind of where that comes from. The microbes are really the core here that we're trying to work with to benefit the health of the trees and making those nutrients accessible through the soil food web. And so our role here is to provide food sources and to support those microbial populations to be able to create healthy trees. We're trying to mimic that forest model that we had just seen a second ago. And one basic idea that I like to share. And we talked about this in some of our previous workshops where we talked about holistic sprays. I would definitely recommend to take a look at that one. Also in our previous workshop about soil fertility, this idea of Liebig's law of the minimum. And this says that the growth of an organism is limited by its most scarce resource. So whatever it is that you are missing, even in these small super trace amounts for things like zinc and copper and phosphorus, is going to have the greatest effect on the overall health of the trees. And so you see this wooden barrel here that is representing each one of those slats, a different nutrient, a different resource that the tree needs to be healthy. And whichever one of those is at its lowest is going to be the weak link in the chain. And so what we're trying to do here with our Korean natural farming ideas is to be able to strengthen that soil food web, to lean into those microbes, to be able to provide them the food sources, and to be able to provide the trees the nutrients and the minerals that they need to do really well. So Korean natural farming started in South Korea. If you think about the food culture and the understanding of microbes in Korea, thinking about kimchi and creating soybean paste. This is a culture that has a very deep understanding of how to utilize beneficial microbes. Comes from thousands of years of observation. And the idea here is that you're strengthening these biological functions by cultivating what are called IMOs, indigenous microorganisms. So thinking about your local forest environment and thinking about the microbial populations that are growing in that forest, those are the things that are going to have the most effective resources to be able to combat whatever types of diseases or challenges that you might have in your orchard. So really, one of the ways that you can think about this is using fermentation and microbes to create the nutrient resources that you need for your trees. And one of the really great tips to think about here is when you are in the peak of the season, when you're in that point where you're seeing disease starting to form, usually in the summertime after things start to get moist and they start to get hot, look around your garden and see what's thriving. See in your orchard what's doing really well. Uh, Usually those plants have certain things in them that are helping them to be resilient in the face of those difficult parts. And those are the things that we're going to turn to make our preparations. Um, the three different preparations that we're going to talk about is going to be this lactic acid bacteria, this fermented plant juice, and a water extract, different types of plant teas that you may have been familiar with. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that now. So here is a kind of idea of the types of plants that you can utilize to make your own amendments at home. Uh, we're thinking about plants that have deep tap roots, that are highly vigorous, that are fast growing, that are sometimes difficult to manage, right? Some of these plants can have sort of a weedy nature, and the reason that they have that is that they have these growth hormones, they have these elements in them that make them really strong. And what we're trying to do is to capture those, to concentrate them, and to give them back to the trees that we are trying to make more resilient to those pathogens that are in the environment. So things like comfrey, dandelion, and nettles, those are really great sort of multivitamin. They have a broad spectrum of nutrients and minerals. Dandelion's got great calcium. The nettles can be also used for silica as well as the horsetail. These are plants that grow sort of across the United States. One of the other great things that you can use for these plant juices is to take your fruit thinnings from early in the season. The idea here is that the fruit thinnings have all the things that your trees need to create a resilient tree that's producing lots of fruit, right? If you are using small fruit thinnings, that will help to get to a more nice, mature fruit in the long run. Garlic is another great thing to use, garlic stems as well. They're great antifungal, great for also absorption. So the garlic has compounds in it that allows for some of these compounds to make their way into the plant cell walls. They enter into the vascular system, the like blood system of the tree, to be able to make its way through all the rest of the tree. Purslane is another really great one. The highest omega-3 fatty acids, and omega-3s are really super important for fruit formulation and for building resiliency in the trees. Knotweed, which is a difficult invasive plant in our area, but it has a really fantastic immune boosting punch to be able to build the systemic resistance to the diseases that are coming against the trees, as well as the dock family have really deep tap roots that are pulling nutrients up from the subsoil, and what we're doing is capturing those nutrients, as well as things like Johnson grass, quackgrass, really strong sources of growth hormones to be able to plant. And I love to hear from some folks, what are some of these plants that you have locally in your area that you see? Like some things that you know are maybe some of your most challenging weeds that are growing in your area. Some of the things that you know have really deep tap roots. Are any of those plants sticking out for you amongst things that you might think you might be able to utilize? Yeah, Russell says burdock. That is a fantastic, fantastic one. one of those really deep, vigorous tap roots. We also love to use our yellow dock, right? One of the ideas that's really cool here is that we're taking plants that can be challenging to us and turning them to our advantage. Jonathan says knotweed. Yes, absolutely. That one is just so great. Actually, one of the commercial planting sprays that we utilize is a concentration of knotweed. And this is just like a really great thing because instead of spending hundreds of dollars on these amendments, you can make them at home with very, very basic processes using weeds from your garden. Comfrey and dandelion. Absolutely, Lindsay. Comfrey is one of the best ones that's out there. I would say that uh, the only thing that I would say about comfrey, it is probably the best for fermented plant juice, but it will really start to stink, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Russell had a question about what point in weed development should we pick them? So that is a good question. It can sort of depend upon the plants, but really one of the most important things is going to be what time of day do we pick them? We're going to pick them in the morning before they have had the sun hit them. That's when they're going to have the most concentration of their nutrients. Like for example, with the stinging nettle, when you pick the stinging nettle when it's in a more leafy stage, you have a different spectrum of nutrients than when you pick it during a seedy stage, when it's already begun to go to seed. It has higher levels of silica. Not to say that one is better or worse than the other, but this is just a really great um, uh, way to kind of distinguish at what point in the season. But no matter what point in the season you get them, they're going to have those really great compounds in them. All right, so water extracts. So we're going to get started with one of the first ways that we utilize to make plant fertilizers. And this is simply to take one of those plants and to let them sit in water. Uh, when we pick those plants early in the morning, they're going to have the natural yeast on the surface of the leaf to be able to kickstart that fermentation, adding that water alongside with that plant that has that yeast on it is going to start that fermentation. This is going to be great to be able to use for a broad spectrum of different nutrients and minerals. One thing with these water extracts, as I mentioned with the comfrey, they're really going to smell pretty foul. However, this is something that the plants are really, really going to love. It's going to be something that feeds them very deeply. And another thing that I should mention as well is when we're spraying these onto the leaves of the trees, up to 25% of those nutrients that go on the leaves of the trees will also make their way down into the root system and into the soil. So you're going to stimulate both the health of the tree itself and this stimulate the soil microbes that are growing beneath them. So again, we're going to just take the growing tips of the healthy plants, we're going to mix them with some water, and then if we want to make them shelf stable, we're going to mix them with a brown sugar. Um, Harvest plants early in the morning, ideally before direct sunlight. We're going to fill a bucket or a jar about 3/4 of the way full with plant material. Um, that material is just going to be based upon what you have. And the more material you put in there, the stronger your solution is going to be. You want to cover it to make sure you don't get any bugs. And again, also the longer we let it sit, the longer and stronger, the stronger the solution will be. So can let it sit anywhere from 2 days to a month. And then what we're going to want to do is strain that liquid off. If you're going to be able to use it immediately, then what you're going to do is just add that to your water, add that to your spraying container. We're going to make sure to dilute that liquid, and I'll give you a little bit more about the dilution rates in a bit. And if we want to be able to make it something that lasts throughout the season, what we're going to do is add an equal amount of brown sugar to the liquid. That's going to take that fermentation process and it's going to kind of feed those sugars. You're also going to get that extra mineral source from from the sugars from the molasses that's going to add to the microbial life. And so Janet has a question about the types of water. So living in a city and have treated water with chlorine, should you get a different water source? So the answer to that is the most like kind of clean spring water you can use, the better that is. If you do have that chlorinated water in the city, what I would recommend is to just let that water at least sit out for a day to allow some of that chlorine to dissolve. It's a good question because what we're really trying to do is to stimulate that microbial growth. Sometimes some of those water additives can disrupt that from happening. So great question.
Ryan, there was also another question about planting these great crops that were mentioned that are also great to use in fermented teas, how much they ate on their own without even using them as fermented teas.
I'm sorry, so the question is,
Just planted on their own, things like burdock or knotweed are great for your soil and for your spaces. Um, They ate on their own without using them as fermented teas, but fermented teas are a different way to utilize them.
yes, exactly. So the idea here with this, like, so some of these plants are also going to have beneficial uh, uh, effects to the soil just in themselves of being there, right? Stimulating those sugars, those growth, a lot of the cover crops, a lot of the things that we think about in plant guilds. So if you go back to our workshop about building resiliency and soil fertility, we go through a long list of those types of plants, but then also exactly we can then take them above ground and concentrate them back to be able to provide as a source to the trees that we're growing.
Yeah.
So
Just to follow up with that, Ryan, was that we plant comfrey around trees, for instance, leave dandelions growing in the crops. That's kind of what I was just wondering and trying to understand the science of how this microbes works, whether in the soil next to the tree as opposed to being sprayed onto the leaf. I really didn't know.
absolutely. So one of the things is, as we say, we're mimicking the forest, right? So that diversity of plant growing underneath the tree understory is a great thing. Dandelions, comfrey, the more diversity that we can fit underneath there, really the greater it is for that underground soil ecology. Also, the things like comfrey are soil builders. They're bringing up nutrients from the topsoil, from the taproot into the topsoil. So they're doing double work. If you're able to be able in a space where you can grow those plants underneath the drip line of your trees, that's a really great thing. If you're in a park setting or in a school setting where you don't have any control of what's growing underneath and you're just having someone mow underneath that, this is a way to be able to create that same effect where, some of the nutrients that are building from those to be able to provide them to the tree. So yeah, that's a great question.
Thank you.
So on an extension, another way that we can utilize these weeds is an idea called fermented plant extracts. And this is essentially the same thing that we're doing here with the fermented teas. But what we're doing is instead of utilizing water, we're just utilizing brown sugar. So the recipe that we're using here, same thing, get those plant tips early in the morning, can be any of those different plants that we were talking about before. Start with about 3 parts of the plant to 2 parts brown sugar. If you're using a little more of a wet material, say you have some rotting peaches, some damaged peaches, what you're gonna do is you're gonna do 1 to 1 of that wet material to the brown sugar. So 1 pound of brown sugar to 1 pound of that plant material. You want to, similarly to doing these fermentations, you're going to want to make sure that that plant material is weighed down. So put a cover on top of that as well to make sure that you're not getting any bugs in there, so that fermentation happens without any disturbances. And then allow that to ferment out for a week. So what you're going to see over the course of the first few days is that brown sugar will start to convert into a liquid. That liquid is extracting all those healthy nutrients in that plant material, in that fruiting material. And that's going to be something that's going to be able to be concentrated back and sprayed back on your trees, or added to your irrigation water. And the type of ratio that we're looking at. So when we are utilizing the liquid extract, the fermented plant teas, those are something that are going to be on the order of a few tablespoons to the gallon. With these fermented plant extract teas, we're really going to have a very, very small amount to be able to add to our spray. Uh, and that's going to enable these to be shelf stable and to last for a long time. So like this small jar really will last me for most of the season, because I'm just really utilizing a small amount um, per spray. So, okay, and so one other really great extract that I love to talk about here is the apple cider vinegar extract. And this is kind of like a very cool elementary school science project. So the idea here is what we're going to do is take some of these common sources of minerals that we have, like eggshells, seafood shells, leftover clam shells or oyster shells, or bones that are left over. We're going to roast that material in the oven at about 300 degrees. You can also throw them into a campfire as well. You're going to let them cook for about 30 to 45 minutes, and then allow that material to cool. And then all you're going to do is cover that material with organic apple cider vinegar. You'll start to see that chemical reaction happen right in front of your eyes. You'll start to see bubbling on those eggshells. That is the chemical extraction of that apple cider vinegar, taking those minerals outside into a liquid form. So particularly calcium, really super great for fruit formation, keeping the tree resilient and healthy throughout the season. So you're going to allow that to bubble away. Once those bubbles stop, that material has been extracted. Usually it'll take a few days, up to a week, and then put that in a cabinet in a dark, cool place. You're going to dilute it 1 tablespoon to the gallon and apply to your watering liquid to the tree, or on a spray, in a backpack sprayer, or just a handheld sprayer. This is going to provide a really great source of nutrients and minerals to the tree during the season while it's developing its fruit. And what we're trying to do is do a regular application so that the trees have what they need during the season to be able to really handle all the things that they're going to come across during those months of fruit development. All right, and one other really fantastic extract that we're going to do. Oh, I forgot to show you. So this is our apple cider vinegar extract, making sure that we put the label here, apple cider vinegar, oysters extract. This was done in July, so I know when this is made. And as you can see here, we have these burned oyster shells. They've been extracted into the liquid here, and that's really all that we've got to do that. And then one other formulation that we're going to talk about today, and this one is one of my favorites, lactic acid bacteria. So lactic acid bacteria exists all around us. This is the thing that uh, uh, that creates things like kimchi things like sauerkraut, what it does is that lactic acid bacteria that exists in the world around us all over the place is going to work here in our favor to work as a natural fungicide. So this is sort of similar to a hydrogen peroxide. Um, Super cool fact, lactic acid bacteria multiply at room temperature faster than any other bacteria. So that means that if we give the right conditions for those bacteria to multiply, we're going to be able to create a culture in which those things are the dominant culture in that solution. So these are one of the most powerful microbes on Earth. They can survive with or without oxygen. They can withstand near boiling temperatures. So what that means is that that allows this bacteria to then outcompete other bacteria, say fire blight or other kind of Pseudomonas or other kind of fungal infections on the tree. Um, so we often utilize this in the instance in the summertime when we're starting to see some of those fungal pathogens start to take hold on the tree. So a really simple process. So what you're going to do is take some rice. Now that rice has starchy water that we're going to rinse off, So if you're just making rice for dinner and you wash that rice off, you're going to save that water. That starchy water is going to be a food source for the lactic acid bacteria. And now all you have to do is take that starchy rice water and let it sit out in a jar for 3 to 5 days. Because the lactic acid bacteria is the most dominant bacteria in the environment, no matter where you are, that's just such a cool thing. It is going to eat those sugars and start to create a white foam on the top of the surface. Once we have that initial lactic acid bacteria started, what we're going to do is then add milk to start to feed that bacteria to become the dominant source in that culture. And the really cool thing is here is that after a few days, you will start to see those curds and whey, the curds being the milk solids starting to formulate at the top of that liquid. And then there will be a whey liquid left behind. Uh, you're gonna strain off those curds. Super cool. That is a naturally fermented lactic acid bacteria cheese. Just a fresh farm cheese that you're also going to be ingesting that lactic acid bacteria for your own microbiome. A whole other workshop that we could talk about, and excited to answer any questions on that as well. And then, so what we're going to do is then have that whey left over, and that is our lactic acid bacteria culture. We're going to add that to our sprayer when we need it during the season, when we're starting to see those fungal diseases start to pop up. If we want to store it for a few months, we can just put it in the fridge. If you want to have it for much longer period, do one of these processes at the beginning of the season and have it for the whole year. Again, adding an equal amount of brown sugar to that liquid. It's going to make it shelf stable. You don't have to store it in the refrigerator. You can just put it in a dark, cool place, and you'll have that lactic acid bacteria to work for you all throughout the season. Are there any questions about the lactic acid bacteria before we move on?
If you have a question, feel free to come off mute to ask your question, or you can type it in the chat.
All right.
I have a question. It may be sort of related in that we fermented a bunch of our sunchokes, Jerusalem artichokes, and I always wonder, like, how long is it safe to keep eating that? that? And so, in some ways, it's like, how long is this going to be okay to then spray? I, yeah, just, it's fermented and I always just wondered, so it's been a year. Can I still keep eating these fermented sunchokes or am I going to get sick?
Yeah, I mean, I think as long, usually the recommendation is within like 3 to 4 months is sort of,
Oh, okay.
but again, a lot of this stuff, it's not necessarily will you get sick if you fermented it correctly in the first place,
Right.
and it has those things that it needs to, once you have that beneficial fermentation happening, um, it's more of a quality thing that starts to go downhill. More so than so if there's still something that you're enjoying, there's no off smells, nothing sort of signaling, no funny looking molds or anything that's signaling that there's anything pathogenic in there. You should be good to go.
Okay. So, and same thing with these products too. Like you're saying, they'll last longer if we add the sugar, store in fridge. Is it kind of like 3 to 4 months or more than that if I'm not seeing, just as you said, all of the other pathogenic kind of symptoms?
Again, yeah, I think it's more so this is sort of like similar to the food best buy dates as opposed to an expiration date. The effectiveness of it as it starts to get older might start to go down. You might not have as many of those active cultures in there. But yeah, that's the with these with adding the brown sugar, doing that fermented plant juice process where we skip the water and just are working with the plant material and the brown sugar. 6 months, 8 months is really kind of a is within that growing season usually is what I try to make sure to use that for. Um,
A question about the mixing ratio. Is the mixing ratio all the same as 1 tablespoon per gallon?
Yes, so we're gonna get a little bit more into the mixing ratios, but yes, that is about kind of what we're looking at. I'm gonna get a little bit further on the mixing ratios in just a second here to talk a little bit more about how you might want to think. There's a couple of different ways to start, but really what we're doing is starting really small, kind of in a homeopathic way. This idea of introducing a very small amount of this thing to be able to create a systemic response that then helps to fix the underlying challenge that we're having. But yeah, great question, Allison. All right, so just to check and see how folks are taking things in and to see if there are any questions, I'm going to ask Ashley to launch that quiz here. And so we're just going to take a few minutes here, uh, put in those answers to these questions. Let me know if you're following along here, if you have any of these things that need to be clarified, if they didn't quite make sense. So we'll take a couple minutes here and get that quiz going through. All right, we're getting there. All right, 75% of the way here. We'll give another 15 seconds or so. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating in the quiz. Oh, no need for test anxiety here. I'm right there with you. All right, fantastic. We got everybody participating in that poll. Ashley, would you mind sharing those results back for us? All right, fantastic here. So this first question, what is the best Korean natural farm preparation for combating fungal diseases. 12 out of 12. Lactic acid bacteria. Great, great job, everybody. Um, on the second question, if you need to add calcium to your trees, what is one of the best sources for doing that? 10 out of 12 here, we got egg and oyster shells in apple cider vinegar. We had one person here who had said fermented plant juice. So definitely we can get some calcium in those fermented plant juice extracts as well. Things like comfrey and dandelion are going to have that calcium in there. But those eggs and oyster shells, those bones are really going to be just super packed with that calcium. Um, and number three, what product do you add to fermented plant juices to make it shelf stable? We got 100% answer in here, organic brown sugar. That's fantastic. Yeah, that brown sugar is going to just stabilize that product to be able to make it um, shelf stable. And on this fourth question, so we had a little bit of these ones are a little difficult when I put the ones that have a couple of different correct answers in there. So one of the most important things is thinking about that smell and also thinking about diluting that material as well. So really here the correct answer is going to be all of the above as we want to think about wearing clothes that are going to be okay to get some of these fermented plant juices on them and to be able to dilute that solution before we apply it. So any questions on any of that stuff before we move on to discussions about dilution rates?
Well, I guess just that you had kind of warned us that in general, there's going to be a lot of strong smells. So knowing that, it's like, well, then I guess I wouldn't be concerned with there being a strong smell in terms of it qualifying its use.
Yeah, absolutely. And that totally makes sense. Just things to be aware of is just to make sure that we when that you don't think that there's something wrong if that solution smells strongly. Similarly to when we're applying that holistic spray in the spring and that last one in the fall that's got that liquid fish in it. You know, that's definitely kind of a smell that can be great to the trees, but maybe a little more offensive to some of our neighbors. I found that lesson out the hard way when I applied it at a preschool garden, and all the kids started yelling stinky.
Yeah.
That was
Okay.
Okay, so talking about application rates and methods. So two main ways that we're going to apply is direct to the soil, just adding it to our water, mixing that in a bucket or a watering can and adding that directly to the soil. Number two, we're going to use it as a foliar spray on the leaves. So creating that fine mist. Again, we talked about this in our holistic spray workshop in March about the idea that we're trying to capture those undersides of the leaves in the early morning and afternoon of the tree. Those openings underneath the leaves, those stomata, are going to be open and receptive to getting those nutrients in them. And also, the idea here is that we really want to coat the top side and the bottom sides of the leaves. That's going to be able to create this competitive colonization, is what Michael Phillips calls it. The idea that we're giving all these really great things all over the tree to be able to outcompete some of these diseases and things that we have. So the dilution rate is going to depend a little bit upon how much material you use and how much time you are using to extract it. So the more material, the longer that you're extracting, the higher the concentration of that is going to be. Start small. beware of applying too concentrated of a solution. You might end up seeing some burning on the leaves or something in that effect if you start to apply a little too much. So as you start to learn about your solution, this is a homemade solution, so we're not going to be able to have exact numbers, but you'll be able to uh, to um, start to see how your plants respond when you are using that. And as I said before, this idea of homeopathic principle apply. So utilizing small concentrations to produce a large result. Sort of think about like a vaccine, how we're triggering that small amount to have a responsiveness of the immune system to respond. And one of the things also we want to think about applying this on a regular schedule. If you can apply it every week, that's amazing. A plus, fantastic. You're going to be able to break up that life cycle of any of those uh, pathogenic microbes, the ones that are causing diseases on the trees. That's going to prevent them from taking hold. If you can apply every 2 weeks, that's also great. But just thinking about, set a reminder in your calendar, uh, do it on the first Friday and the third Friday, set whatever way it is for you to be able to apply that on a regular schedule. So for these different application rates, here is a little bit better of a breakdown of what we're talking about for those application rates. And these are kind of these starter dilution rates. So with that water extract, again, it's going to be a lot more, it's not going to be as concentrated as that fermented plant juice. So we're going to be using about a 1/2 cup per gallon to 2 cups per gallon, depending upon how long you're letting that sit and how strong of a solution you have. When we're working with the fermented plant juices, working with a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons per gallon. I'm sorry, a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons for a 4-gallon backpack. So when we're looking at 1 gallon, we're talking about a 1/2 tablespoon, a 1/4 tablespoon per gallon. Starting with that 1 to 1,000 rate, you can try that 1 to 500 rate. Also with that lactic acid bacteria, very small amount, 1/4 tablespoon per gallon. So for when I use my 4-gallon backpack sprayer, I'm only using 1 tablespoon of this solution. You can see how many solutions that is going to to be able to give you throughout the season. Same thing with that apple cider vinegar extract. And I see we got a couple questions in the chat here. Jonathan had the question about recommending straining liquids, clogging a sprayer nozzle. So one of the best things that I would do here is to make sure we'll strain it through a cheesecloth is probably the best thing if we're seeing some of those physical particles going through. An old nylon stocking is also a great thing to be able to use to be able to prevent that clogging from happening. Oftentimes we will kind of jump around and shake that sprayer because we know how challenging it can be when we do get a clogged sprayer nozzle. Another recommendation that I have is to have a backup sprayer on hand because it is a very frustrating thing if that sprayer nozzle does get clogged and you have that solution ready to go in the orchard and the equipment is not working. So. And then we have a question from Russell about the best time of day to apply foliar spray. Absolutely. So the best time of day to apply the foliar spray is going to be early in the morning before the sun hits the leaves or in the late afternoon, evening, uh, when the sun is starting to go down. Those are going to be the best times for those leaves to absorb those nutrients from the solutions that you're giving. And then as well, throughout the growing season is the best time to be able to spray these things. So as your trees are starting to really grow, starting to develop fruit, they're going to need a lot of those nutrients. As the summer starts to go, you start to get hot, rainy days. you're going to see more fungal pressure. So utilizing all of these different sprays as elements in your toolkit, right? So you have these different go-tos to turn to if you need uh, um, to to turn to when you're having some of these things. It's sort of like having a complex first aid kit for the orchard. And great question, Janet. Do these solutions have any known effects on insects, beneficial or destructive? No, that is one of the really fantastic things about these solutions. These are amazing, natural alternatives to chemicals, to even some of the like more beneficial sprays, using neem oil as well has some toxic effect to pollinators, which is one of the reasons why, or that is while it's wet. Once it dries, it does not. But really great question. That is one of the reasons why this is such an exciting thing to be able to learn. You're able to take these really simple processes, do them at home, do them for free, and you're able to avoid the impacts that a lot of these pesticides and fertilizers have on the ecology and the pollinators in our food system. And Ashley has put in the chat a link to our holistic spray workshop. There's a really great collection of notes as well that shows kind of everything that we talked about. A lot of these similar principles that we're talking about here today. If you're not familiar with spraying, when to spray, what time of season to spray, that is a great resource. So I wanted to just shout out a couple of these resources. Really great teachers that I learned these processes from. Nigel Palmer's book, The Regenerative Grower's Guide to Garden Amendments. This has got all of these same recipes in here, and also a great breakdown of the nutrient content in the back here that shows kind of the wide array of nutrients that we've got going here. I'll be sure to include these in the notes as well. This book was a really fantastic one for me in terms of opening my mind to what was happening is Michael Phillips' Mycorrhizae Planet. You can find his keynote speech at the NAFEX conference, the North American Fruit Explorers Conference. That was a really fantastic way to think about how we can effectuate the health of our trees. Michael Phillips, the apple grower or the holistic orchard, really great resources. As I said, we'll be following up here with different resources from this workshop. We're so thankful to have you here. Please take our survey. That is going to be really super helpful for us for being able to understand what it was that you took away from this workshop. It helps us to formulate our workshops in the future. These workshops are free, and this helps us to get funding to be able to show what people are learning and to show the impacts of these workshops. We hope that you can join us for our upcoming workshop in November. That is going to be covering school orchards with our affiliate at Retree Us in Maine, who has over 100 orchards in the New England area. Really excited about that workshop. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Be sure to check out our website for resources. Again, as I said, we'll be following up with an email that includes a lot of the things that we had here today and a recording of this workshop as well. Thank you so much for joining us. And with that, I'd be happy to take some questions.
I'm happy to do the survey. Where is it?
Yeah, let me put that in the chat here.
It was awesome. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. Really love getting to share about these things with everyone.
Okay, see, I see the link now. Okay, I'll go there. I have I, I have several Korean friends who have over the years shared with me. They just label it EM, and I don't know whether they've bought it or they've just given it to me,
Yes.
something they've made, but I'm assuming this is basically what you're talking about.